I was at the April conference in 2003, and we were standing outside the conference center. That was right after the 2002 Olympics, and so they had these new security protocols in place. So everybody was standing around on the outside of the plaza, waiting to be able to go through the scanners to go in and get into the session. And I noticed there was this huge banner, this great big banner outside of the conference center, and it said very clearly, it's a big white banner with big red letters, and it says, "DNA proves the Book of Mormon is false." And I was looking at that, and at the time I had access, I was working on a natural sciences textbook project with some colleagues, and had access to some of the top research libraries in the country. And I said, you know what, what's the answer to that? Not that I needed to have an answer for myself, but just, I know that the Book of Mormon is true. So therefore, I know that there's going to be answers for it. Now, sometimes the Lord may have us wait, it may be actually beyond our lifetime, but there's going to be an answer for this. And so I decided, I'm going to at least look into this whole DNA question. The DNA issue has became a huge issue, and it still, even today, is a very large issue for many members of the church. There has been literally, I don't know if I'd be tens of thousands or whatever, but there's at least thousands of people who have left the church over the issue of the lack of DNA evidence to support the Book of Mormon claims of a Hebrew people being here someplace in America, back in the time frame of the Book of Mormon. And so I started looking into it. I started finding some very interesting things, and essentially, in a nutshell, what happened was when DNA sequencing became possible. As they started to sequence DNA from Native American populations through North, Central, and South America, they found that their DNA could be categorized into one of four primary groups called haplogroups, or I'll just call them lineages. And so you have they call them haplogroups A, B, C, and D, and they found that the markers that differentiate between these four groups, all of those markers could be found in Asian populations, which basically links all Native American peoples here in North America to Asia. But Lehi and his family, were they Asian? No, they weren't. They were Hebrews. They came down through the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're not Asians. And yet, when they sequenced the DNA from the Mayan kings down in Central America, for example, they found that they were 100% Asian. And of course, that doesn't bode well for the Book of Mormon, because the Book of Mormon the evidence for the Book of Mormon should indicate some sort of a Hebraic or a Hebrew people, not Asiatic people, as far as that's concerned. And so, actually, there was a DVD called DNA versus the Book of Mormon that was put out by a company up in Brigham City, Utah, Living Hope Ministries. And that DVD has been pretty devastating to a lot of people's faith. And the reason why is, unfortunately, because at the time when it was produced, which was in 2003, it was actually, 2002, beginning of 2003, the information in it, from a genetic standpoint, was actually correct. There was no evidence that for Hebrew people among the indigenous populations of the Americas. And then there was an interesting interview, actually, that was done during the 2002 Olympics with President Hinckley. There was this German reporter, and he asked President Hinckley, what's going to be your church's position when DNA shows that there's no evidence for the Book of Mormon? And President Hinckley was almost visibly upset by the question. But he kind of actually cut off the reporter and said, that hasn't been established yet. We don't know the answer to that yet. He says, as far when it comes down to genetics, he says, we don't know the answer to this, not at this point. That was in 2002. I submit that President Hinckley is a prophet of God, because 1 year later, articles started to come out in scientific peer-reviewed genetics journals that talked about a new founding lineage. These were these forward lineages. They found a new founding lineage, which was primarily found among the Algonquin-speaking language groups of North American Indians. And they were indicated by 5 specific markers in their DNA that differentiate them from the other 4. And when they went looking for these 5 markers in other populations around the earth, guess where they found them? they were in the Druze population of Israel. They found that they were, later on, additional research found that they were in the Ashkenazi Jews population, which is the largest population of Jews on the planet. It's in the Sephardic Jews, the Libyan Jews, the Moroccan Jews, the Tunisian Jews. All of these diverse Jewish populations around the world have these 5 markers, which are also found in the Algonquin-speaking language groups, which is about 110 Native American tribes in North America. For example, the Sioux and the Cheyenne and the Blackfoot, the Cherokee, the Iroquois, the Ojibwe, the Sac and the Fox, Potawatomi, the Penobscot. All of these tribes, and mostly concentrated in the Great Lakes region of the United States and Canada, is where they find these 5 markers in these people. And so they actually they started to dig up bones from the ancient mound builder civilization that occupied the heartland of North America. And when they sequenced the bones directly from those people, they found the same 5 markers, and they carbon date into Book of Mormon timeframes. So unlike the Mayan civilization in Central America, which has no evidence for any Hebrew population, these up here do have solid genetic evidence that they came from that. These tribes today came from their ancestral people are the mound builder civilization of North America. They're not the Mayans from Central America. And so that led me to go, well, good grief. Maybe there's something to this. But what I found is that there is a very highly organized and entrenched group of scholars, primarily have been from BYU, who have over the course of time been looking for evidences for the Book of Mormon down in Mesoamerica or Central America among the Mayan civilization. And they've done extensive research and extensive writing and so forth. What we found is that they have done this primarily because it was believed that Joseph Smith thought that the Book of Mormon happened in Central America. And so really, now this is before there's been some really breakthroughs in the last year, just in the last few months in regard to that. But prior to that, I wanted to find out, well, what did Joseph Smith know about all this? I mean, he obviously saw angels, and he met with some of these actual people from the Book of Mormon timeframes, these prophets and so forth that came to actually visit him. But what did he really know about it, the geography of the Book of Mormon? And then that led to an intensive study about Joseph Smith and what he knew about this. And probably some of the most powerful things as far as that's concerned is that Joseph Smith, there's really 2 or 3 different things that really indicate what Joseph Smith knew as far as this is concerned. One of them is that he was commanded by the Lord when the very first copies of the Book of Mormon, after they were just now coming off of the Grandin Press there in Palmyra, New York. And the Lord commanded Joseph Smith to send missionaries unto the Lamanites. And this is all recorded in the Doctrine and Covenants. So this is canonized scripture. In that section 28 and 30 and 32, the Lord commanded Joseph Smith to send Oliver Cowdery, Peter Whitmer Jr., Pridey P. Pratt, and a guy by the name of Ziba Peterson to take those first copies of the Book of Mormon and go unto who? The Lamanites. And in every single one of those sections in the Doctrine and Covenants, it specifically calls them Lamanites. It didn't say to go to the Indians. He said go to the Lamanites. But in section 32 of the Doctrine and Covenants, right after he called Ziba Peterson, the Lord said something very critical, very important. He said, and Ziba Peterson shall go with them, and I myself will go with them and go before them. He says, I will be in their midst, and that nothing shall prevail against them. This is a personal guided tour by the Lord himself to the Lamanites. Now, big question is, as a member of the church, do you believe that the Lord knows where the Lamanites are located? Because if you do, then this is a personal guided tour by the Lord to those people, to the actual remnant of the actual Lamanites who were here. And where did they go? Pridey P. Pratt wrote this in his journal, and later on it was in his autobiography. They went to go visit 4 tribes. They were in There were the Cattaraugus Indians in New York, the Wyandottes of Ohio, and I can't remember the last name, but they were in 3 places: New York, Ohio, and Missouri. And what's interesting, and I think it's more than interesting, I think it's critically important we understand, when modern day geneticists have sequenced the DNA from those tribes that they went to go see, every one of those tribes are the tribes, the exact tribes, that have the 5 markers in their DNA that link them to every Jewish population on the planet. Now, how did Joseph Smith know that? Lucky guess, right? I submit that there's only one way that Joseph Smith would have known that, and that is because Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. And he knew exactly, he was not speculating about whether or not these were Native American, these Native Americans were the Lamanites. The Lord said they were. And he said he was going to take them on a personal, private journey to go to these people and tell them. And tell them, this book is the history of your ancestors. Twice Joseph Smith did that with the Sac and the Fox Indians that had been driven out of their lands and across the Mississippi River into Iowa. And then they came back when the Saints established Nauvoo. They came back. One time they came back, and Joseph Smith said, he actually told them, this is in the history of the church. He said, this book is the history of your ancestors. And who told him? The Great Spirit. That's what he said. Joseph Smith claimed the Great Spirit, i.e. God, the Lord, had told him that this book was the history of the ancestral people of the Sac and the Fox Indians. Well, who are the ancestral people of the Sac and the Fox Indians? They weren't the Mayans. They were the Hopewell Mound Builder civilization of North American Indians. And then there was a second time. People said, well, yeah, maybe Joseph Smith kind of thought that at the beginning, but then he changed his mind. Well, there's no evidence that Joseph Smith ever changed his mind, because 1 month before his assassination, he had the Sac and the Fox Indians came again a second time. And this is actually written in his personal journal. And the second time he told them, this book is about your ancestors, and the Great Spirit told me so. I believe Joseph Smith. I believe he was a prophet of God. I believe the Lord knows exactly where the Lamanites are located, and all of it points to the North American Indians are the remnant Lamanites. And if that's the case, then their ancestral people are not from Central America. They are from the heartland of North America.